compute. And then just to kind of give you a rundown, man. I mean, I'll do a quick intro. We'll have a little banter back and forth. And then honestly, man, like I said in the text, the goal of this is to tell your story. And sometimes it means we go back to the very beginning where it all started. Hey, where'd you grow up? Your parents like?
That's funny. Let me shut this door. Hold on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Were you an athlete, student? What were you like? Because I think a lot of times that tells a person's story from where they, especially on the athletic side, or what they may have gone through as a struggle as a young person, or as an adult, or as a child, or whatever that was, and how that it plays into our story, our overall greater story.
Yeah.
And then we'll just let the conversation kind of go, and you'll tell your story, and I'll ask some questions here or there. I don't really have scripted questions. It is really just a conversation about you telling these, my listeners, your story. And then when we get towards the end, I'll ask some more pointed questions towards the end of just like, hey, what advice do you have to give out to somebody that wants to live their life as a trailblazer? What are some lessons that you've learned that really plays a role in how you lead? Definitely, we'll talk about your personal vision statement and how you came to figuring that out. So just like I said, a fun conversation to have.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I don't know how far back you want me to start, but I can go anywhere.
We start at the beginning. I mean, literally, most guys have been, I've had guys who be like, yeah, this is where I grew up. This is what it was like growing up. My mom did this, my dad did that. So,
okay. All right.
Well, and here we go. Welcome to another episode of the Trailblazer podcast, where we celebrate men who are making a difference in their world. I'm your host, William Walker, and today we have the CEO of 5 Capitals and my friend, Tim Urmston. Tim is has been the founder and CEO of a global market research firm based in Cincinnati, and has also built a lasting legacy working with Fortune 500 companies around the world, helping them innovate for growth. With a strong aversion to apathy and complacency, Tim has spent his life developing leaders across the marketplace through a comprehensive skill set based in emotional intelligence and strategic thinking. But what I like most about him, other than just he's a great guy, is the fact that he has an amazing personal vision statement, and that is to add value to every life my life intersects. Welcome to the show, Tim.
Yeah, thanks, William. Good to be here, man. This is awesome. Here we go.
When someone reads that to you, isn't it?
It's kind of weird, man. It's it's kind of like listening to yourself talk or watching yourself speak or those kind of things. It's just it gets awkward and uncomfortable. So appreciate that. It's awesome.
So, hey, look, in Corey's, I literally started reading from his book. And that's just weird.
I'm sure he loved that. That was good.
But I just think it gives people an outlook on who you are, and that's really the goal of this podcast. I texted you earlier. I had this conversation with somebody the other day. I said, because I was really battling with, hey, do I need to make sure each one of these podcasts has these 5 bullet points to walk away with, or hey, this one new tool? And I'm like, you know what? I started this podcast just wanting to tell the stories of men who've decided to live and lead their lives in a different way, and in a way that would create hope and challenge other men to go, hey, you know what? I can make just a small change in my life and really live my life different. That's going to have a huge impact, positive impact on my family, a positive impact on my professional life, a positive impact on the people around me and the life that I live. And to me, that's living this, I think the intro says like Jesus was a trailblazer, and it was really because of how he lived his life. I mean, that and all the other things he did, but just how he lived. Anyway, enough about me. So you've had quite the career. I mean, I know that in your bio, it says that you've been doing this for over 24 years. From CEO to founder, entrepreneur. I know that you've also been a pastor. You've had quite the diverse background of things over your career. What's been some of the things that really stood out, and then we'll probably get back into like where it all came from.
Yeah, I don't know. I found out not that long ago that I'm a 7 on the Enneagram. That explains all of this, right? I love adventure. I love new things. I love spending time with people uh, you know, who aren't afraid to take risks, who aren't, and I'm just a serial entrepreneur. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it. I've started, 8 entities, whether that be a church or a business or whatever. And what's interesting about that is I love to kind of build them, grow them, start them, build them, grow them, and then either pass them on to somebody to continue to shepherd or sell them or whatever. It's a constant thing for me. I get bored really easily, and sometimes that's a blessing, sometimes that's a curse.
Yeah.
But anyway, they there are people who live their lives that are just like 1+1+1+1+1+1+1, and they keep going, right? And that's the way it happens, and it's a steady, you know, that's just not me. And I used to apologize for it, and I don't anymore, because for me, it's like 1+1+3 -2 +6 -5 +16 -4 +20 -19. It's just, but somehow you end up in a place where at the end of your days, you look back at the legacy and you go, wow, what a ride, man. What a ride this has been, and what an impact. And I'm enjoying looking at that right now in my later years. Let's call it that. Okay.
I get that, man. I mean, I used to apologize for my career the same way when you looked at my resume, because it was, hey, 3-4 years, next thing, 3-4 years. And now, kind of knowing what I know as a coach, and just later in years, I'm able to look back and kind of go, after about 4 years, I built it up and kind of got everything working. And
Yep.
I mean, and it's not me patting, I'm not like all prideful doing it, but I was like, I'm bored now. I like to build.
Yeah. Yeah. It's self-awareness. I mean, it all comes down to self-awareness. And obviously when we coach, that's what we work with the leaders that we coach. That's what we work on first, is know thyself, right? If you don't know yourself, then you're not going to be effective at doing anything, quite frankly. And when you know yourself, you can also learn to love yourself and appreciate yourself for the things that God, how God made you and how He's wired you, which is unique, right? It's good.
Definitely, without a doubt, that is very, very true. I think that's a great segue to kind of talk into, hey, like, so where it all began for you, I mean,
Yeah. So grew up in Cincinnati.
okay.
Grew up in Cincinnati, in a little suburb north of Cincinnati. And this is an interesting part of my story, is the neighborhood that I grew up in was a predominantly Black neighborhood. So I was the minority in the neighborhood I grew up in. And so I have a different perspective on the differences in people and the perspectives that we carry and all that kind of stuff. And there's some things in the traditional sense that I don't understand about how we divide. And so, how we're divided amongst each other. People say, well, it's because of this. And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Right. In some ways that puts me at a disadvantage, because I can't really join the conversation sometimes. But it gave me a perspective of the appreciation of just people and the diversity of people and the beauty of people and all that. And I had a dad who was a truck driver, so blue collar family. Dad was a truck driver. Mom was a stay-at-home mom. We didn't have a whole lot of money. We used to take vacations, and our meals in the car. We'd stop for lunch, and we would do the economy lunch. My dad called it the economy lunch, and we'd get a large fry at McDonald's in the car, and we would all share the large fry. And to me, that was something amazing. That was special. It was like, yeah, we're going to McDonald's and getting some fries. It's just incredible. So had a incredible family that I grew up with. Both parents stayed married, loved each other, loved us. My dad was a big fan of consequential learning. And I don't know if anybody knows what that means, but essentially my dad never gave me a curfew, for example. He just said, hey, you can stay out as late as you want, but just be at work at 6 a.m. in the morning with me out in the sun, putting these things together. Because later on, he became a guy who built idlers that conveyor belts roll on in coal mines. And so we would put those together out in the sun at 6 a.m. I stayed out till 4 a.m. my first Friday that he told me that. And I felt so horrible the next day. I was probably in bed by 10:30 every Friday night, with the exception of football season. just because I didn't want to have another day like that. So dad with consequential learning taught me a lot about leadership through action, not through words. Um, a mom who was very caring, very encouraging, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, the youngest of three, a brother that's 7 years older and a sister that's 5 years older. And so, the first kid, you're always like, let's put them in Pampers and sterilize the bottles and all that stuff. By the time you get to the third kid, it's kind of like, let's wrap them in newspaper and let them play in the street and be fine. That was me. And so kind of had to forge my own way and get through all that stuff, which might explain why I'm wired the way I am, which is so much fun. So, yeah, so that's kind of my upbringing in a nutshell. We had a lot of fun, and my brother, love my brother to death. He's doing great now, but back in the day, he got involved in some drugs and some other things, and I watched that relationship between he and my dad kind of deteriorate. And I just decided to go a different way. And so, had nothing to do with that, and just said I'm going to have a lot of fun, but I'm not going to get involved in the drug scene or anything like that. It's just too much, too weighty. Yeah. So that's probably where the responsibility came from. It's just watching that, from afar. He's fine now, by the way. He's doing great. And married and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, but I don't know. That leads me up to high school. I was an athlete in high school, played 3 sports.
What sports you play?
I played football, wrestled, and baseball.
Oh, man, nice.
Yeah, and was a quarterback in football. That was my sport. That was the one I loved the most. And actually, that's where I got introduced to the concept of leadership. So I'll tell you a really quick story. It's kind of fun. I was sophomore in high school. I was playing quarterback. We're playing the #1 team in the city, a school called Moeller, and we are undefeated. They're undefeated, and it's on our field. And so I throw a pass. We're on our 40-yard line. I throw a pass out to the side. Guy catches. He runs it all the way down to the end zone. Right before he crosses the line, guy from Moeller punches the ball out from behind. It goes in the end zone, and they recover it. So we don't score, and they get a touchback. And I'm thinking, oh man, I'm so disappointed in this guy who fumbled the ball, whatever. And I come off the sideline, and the coach comes over to me, not the kid who fumbled. And he's got this big wad of tobacco in his lower lip, and he grabs my face mask, and he's like, "What happened out there?" He's yelling at me, and all the spit's flying in my eyes and stuff. And I remember going, "Coach, that's not on me." I was a cocky, 14-year-old, right? I'm like, "Coach, that's not on me. That's not my issue. I didn't do it. I didn't fumble the ball." And he looked at me and said something that I've not forgotten. I'm 55 now. He looked at me, he goes, "You're the leader. It's always on you." And I went, that's going to stay with me the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's interesting when you look at Jim Collins and how he teaches about level 5 leadership. He said level 5 leaders are leaders who give credit away when things go well, and they take the blame. They own it when things don't go well for the entire team. That's what level 5 leaders do. And essentially, his book, Good to Great, in a nutshell, it's great companies are led by level 5 leaders. Good companies are led by other leaders. Right.
That's so good. That is, it is so true, though. I mean, it really, really is. I've got a couple different roles in where I'm at currently, and I see and walk through some of that on a regular basis, as well as have to own some of those things on a regular basis on my own. Hey, look, this is what I did, or this happened, and I had to look at it and go, well, I didn't give them the tools that they needed to get through to it. I have to ask myself, what did I not give them? Or what did you not get from me that you needed from me? Because this is my fault. Yes, it happened. And yes, you were the one that it happened to, but it's my fault because I didn't do something that you needed to make sure you were successful.
Right.
And
so that mantle of leadership is heavy. Yep. It's good stuff.
Yeah. It was a lesson that was hard for me to learn for quite a while too, though. So I was a cocky guy for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. Fortunately, I learned that at a very young age. And after that, everything kind of changed, and went on and had a really, good football career there. Grew up, and I didn't take the traditional route of college. So I got a scholarship from a thing called, it was the WCKY, was a radio station in Cincinnati. It was called it's called Student of the Month, and then it turned into Student of the Year. Right, there was 12 recipients, and then I got the one for the year. It was like $1,500, and their slogan was, "Sometimes a C is better than an A." I said, "Wow." So I mean, and so it was all built on being involved in things more than it was your grades and things like that. Which, by the way, I think we should do more of that, actually, right? Because the real leaders are the ones who benefit out in the get out in the real world and kind of live this stuff out,
Mhm.
as opposed to just live in the books. And so, of course, I'm saying that because I got that, but anyway, I quickly lost that scholarship when I flunked out of college my first year at Toledo. I majored in let's just call it drinking and partying instead of going to class. I scheduled 8 o'clock a.m. classes and then worked at Charlie's Blind Pig every night. So you can't stay out till 3 in the morning and then go to 8 o'clock classes. It's not going to work. So anyway,
Successful.
as a young, ignorant freshman, of course, my dad, this consequential learning, just looked at me very calmly and said, "Yeah, you're not getting another dime out of me." And so had to start paying for college myself at that point. And it's funny when you have skin in the game, how much you take it more serious. So it took 11 years after that first year screw up of night school and weekend school and everything else to graduate. So I got my bachelor's and my master's from Xavier University after attending 4 other colleges to kind of make my way and decide who I wanted to be. But got a job at Procter and Gamble, started working there and learned a ton about leadership at Procter and Gamble.
So I
Um,
gotta ask, what were you doing for those 11 years, man?
I got married and
That's
had
a lot
kids.
of time.
I got married and had kids. I graduated with 2 kids in my arms, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
yeah. So, and I had to work, because, you know, you work because you got to support
Good.
your family. So, along the way, I was, after my freshman year of college, after that freshman year, I met my wife, Joanne, the love of my life and the best thing that ever happened to me. And she has inspired me every day since. And, um, so we kind of went on separate paths. She went back to Ball State after I got home from Toledo, which is where I went to school for that first year. And yeah, just missed her, dated for 4 years, and then got married. And we were pregnant 4 months after we got married. We got pregnant and had our first kid a year into our marriage, a little over a year in our marriage. So
So what
yeah.
kind of jobs were you holding down while going through school? Or were you log on to something and was it the old
Oh
time?
man. Oh man, you had to bring that up. So I worked at UPS at night. And so um, I would unload and load trucks and UPS from midnight through 5 a.m. And so there was a guy standing over me with a stopwatch, uh, timing me as I unloaded trucks. And, at one point I remember it was like 3 in the morning. I'm sweating like a pig, I'm just gross. And I thought, what am I doing here? Like, this is ridiculous. But I didn't want any debt. I didn't want to have to go into debt for college and
Hmm.
take the easy way out. So well, easy short term, pain long term. I'd rather do pain now and get, long term, joy out of life. And so graduated with no debt because I worked at UPS and did that thing. But I used to leave work at like, 5, 6 in the morning, and I'd go sit over at Xavier and at the college, and I would sit there in the parking lot, and I'd go in covered in box soot and, you know, boots and whatever, flannel shirts and all that kind of stuff, smelling awful. I'm sure I'd go to class and no one would sit next to me. And, very different than most of the students at Xavier at the time. It was kind of a, preppy school, expensive school. Um, but I got a scholarship there too because I filled out every form possible to do that. And alumni, gave a lot of scholarships. So that's how I got through school debt free. So those 11 years were paid for, some out of my pocket, some out of scholarship money or whatever. But
What lessons learned do you have from working at UPS? Sounds like you have some good stories in there.
oh
It's
yeah, you know
memories
what?
that really
Uh,
help mold you.
Great company to work for. Really great company to work for. Honestly, I mean, it taught me a lot about being on time, logistics, responsibility, that there are other people around you depending on you. Culture was really important, all that kind of stuff. And there were some things they didn't get right too. But overall, I learned how to work really hard for what you wanted. And that's, I wasn't afraid of that. And I think that probably comes from my dad as well. Really strong work ethic going through that. But it also taught me what I didn't want, which was, man, I don't want to work physically. I don't want to work this hard the rest of my life. My body won't hold up. So I thought if I better get this college degree because, I want to do something other than, just beat the heck out of my body for years. So
You study in college?
so at that time I got an associate's degree from Cincinnati State in marketing management. And then I got a bachelor's in liberal arts from Xavier, and then a master's business administration with an emphasis in marketing from Xavier. So graduated with my MBA at that point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I went very similar route. I was in my late 30s when I went back to school, and I had probably about 3 different schools underneath my belt prior to that, as well as 4 years in the Marine Corps. But it's associate's degree in hospitality management, and then a bachelor's degree in business management. And then I was like, I'm done. I've got a certificate of completion for seminary school.
I say you took the scenic route to me. That's what I call it. Everybody asked me, where'd you go to college? I said, well, I took the scenic route. I want to enjoy it all the way through. And I did, man. I had a ball. I had a ball going to college and doing all that kind of stuff. But there was something very satisfying after I graduated to know that I had no debt and I had a job at P&G. And I had a bunch of people I went to school with that were up to their earballs and, in debt.
Mm-hmm.
And they hadn't landed a job yet. And I was thinking, man, I don't know why you would do that, but I get it. So I don't know, just a different.
Sorry, go ahead.
Just a different approach. That's
Yeah,
all
I was just gonna say. So was P&G like in your sights when you were working on your MBA, or was there? I mean, I know what it's like here on the campus here. I mean, those students are doing internships as many as they can to get plugged in and connected with companies. So
yeah, it's interesting because half of my career, my college career was UPS. The other half was P&G. I got a job as a research associate there. Started at the very bottom, like washing stains out of fabrics in washing machines, right? I mean, at all hours of the night, whatever. But that was part of it. And so when I got in there, it was one of those just work hard and see what happens. And so got hired full time. And actually went for my MBA. That's what made me decide to go for my MBA was I wanted to advance in the company. And so I thought I'm going to go get that MBA and see what happens. And so I got the MBA and they actually paid for my MBA. They reimbursed me as long as I got, a B or an A, I think in the courses they reimbursed it. So that's another way I found to kind of get through college. And then when I graduated, I loved what I was studying so much about entrepreneurialism that I thought someday I'm going to own my own company. I'm going to start my own thing because I'm just not a corporate guy. I'm not great with bosses. Not that I don't work hard for them or anything like that, or not that they were bad people. They were great people. I loved the bosses that I had. I just, it was too confining, I guess. Maybe is a way to say it. I just felt there were possibilities out there. So I haven't had a boss in probably 30 years.
oh man, that's good.
So yeah.
So did you have anybody like mentoring you that was kind of just, was there somebody in there that was just kind of going, hey man, I know you're down here just washing dirty laundry to make sure this laundry detergent works well to get the stain out that we say it's going to get out.
Yeah, but you know what? It wasn't anybody at either one of the places that I worked. It was as a group of guys that I had met. So this is a part of my story that's kind of hard to talk about. I get a little emotional about it, but so our first 5 years of marriage, we got married really early. So I was 22, my wife was 21. We didn't know what we were doing. We had no money. I'm going to college. Yeah, by the way, I'm also coaching high school football at this point. And
Side hustle.
working overtime at work and just doing everything I could right, at the time to kind of keep the lights on. But that was what I was telling myself. But the fact was, our marriage was bad the first 5 years. We fought. Every other word was divorce. It was really bad. We were both two selfish kids that, didn't know what the heck we wanted and where we were going and all that kind of stuff. And so these guys, it was actually my brother-in-law. I went for a walk with him one day and I said, man, I got to find a solution here because this isn't working. And he said to me, he goes, hey, and we were Catholic at the time, and I was very grateful for that upbringing and all that kind of stuff. And at least, felt like I knew where to turn at that time. And so we went for some counseling at the Catholic Church, and just didn't seem to land with us. I'm sure it lands with a lot of other people, but didn't land with us. And so I'm talking to my brother-in-law on this walk, and he goes, hey, if you ever think about, trying something else, you should check out our church. It's a non-denominational church in Cincinnati. It was, at that time, it was the beginning of the mega church era. And this was one of the first mega churches around. And so, and as bad as our marriage was, it was awful. It was awful. And we were kind of sleeping in separate rooms, and we had two kids at the time. Well, we had one kid at the time and one on the way. And, but it had gotten so bad, we were in different rooms. And then another guy at the gym told me I should go check out this church. And so one day I just said to my wife, I said, look, I don't know if we're going to make it. We need God in this thing, because I don't know what to do. And so I said, I'm going to go to this church. I'm going to check it out. And I gave her a couple cassette tapes to listen to, because I had already listened to them by the pastor there. And we had all kinds of problems. I mean, we were $170,000 in debt, and only 70 of it was our house. So we had $100,000 in consumer debt, because the way I solved problems, I just bought her things.
Mm-hmm.
And that would last for like 3 days. And then, we'd be at it again and all that kind of stuff. And so just created a mess with all that. And so my brother-in-law put his arm around me and he said, hey, why don't you come out with us on Thursday night, me and these three other guys. And we just go to this place, this little bookstore in Cincinnati, down in the worst part of town, called Caldy's. We go there at 10 o'clock at night. We'd eat cherry cobbler and we'd talk about Jesus.
Mm.
And I did mostly listening, but I remember coming home from those nights all jacked up on caffeine and falling in bed and just going, man, if this is true, that changes everything. Like, it changes everything of who I want to be as a human being. And so we ended up going to this church, and these guys walking alongside me, they became mentors to me. And a really profound thing happened. One of the guys in the group, he said to me, he became my true mentor. His name's Keith Brown. He's about 10 years older than me, and he asked me what was going on with my marriage, and I said, I don't know, man. I said, I think I'm doing everything I can do. I'm trying to be better at this, better at that, and she's not responding, and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And he asked me this really profound philosophical question. He goes, how's that going for you? And I hate that question. Like, I hate it. To this day, I hate that question because it's so convicting. And I was like, well, it's not going good, man. It's going bad. That's what I'm trying to tell you. And he goes, I want you to do something for me. He goes, I want you to go home tomorrow. I want you to start this. And back then we didn't have cell phones or, smartphones or whatever. He goes, I want you to set an egg timer, turn off all technology. I want you to put her feet on your lap on the couch, and I want you to rub her feet. Here's the rule. You cannot make any statements. You can't fix anything. All you are allowed to do is rub her feet, listen, and ask clarifying questions. That's all you're allowed to do. Right. And I learned later on that I struggled back then to be fully present with her or anybody. Right. It was just, I had kind of a ADHD thing going on, undiagnosed, but I'm sure I have it at some level. And I wouldn't pay attention to her. And she would say things like, you just don't pay attention when I'm talking to you. You're not here when you're supposed to be here. And so he said, do this. And so I did it for 30 days. He said, I dare you for 30 days. I'm like, yeah, whatever. But, and, just to prove him wrong, because I was competitive, I'm like, I'll do it. So I did it, and nothing really changed, right? Not a whole lot changed. And so I went back to him. I said, it's 30 days. Nothing's changed. He goes, do it for another 30 days. And I said, okay, now you're pushing. And he's like, just trust me, do it for another 30 days. So I did. And about 15 days into that 30-day next 30 days of rubbing her feet, something changed. All of a sudden I started seeing her trying to outserve me. Like we started out serving each other. It was a weird thing. It was like, no, I'll show you. I'm a better servant than you are in this marriage. And and something happened. It just clicked. And um, so yeah, one day you'll love this. So I used to, when all this was going on, we had our first daughter, Sarah. We had our daughter, first daughter, Sarah. And we got home from the hospital that night and we were watching the news, and some lady had thrown her like 2-month-old baby out the window into a dumpster or something. It was back during that era where people were getting rid of their babies or whatever. And man, it just broke me. It was one of those moments where I was like, oh, this is so awful, this world. And I knew my marriage was in trouble. So, I went and held my daughter and I looked at her and I thought, how in the world? I looked up, I said, how in the world could you expect me to raise her when I can't even manage myself right now? And I went to the bedroom, our bedroom. I closed the door and locked it. And I got on my knees and I said, this is my prayer. So I hope your listeners don't get offended by this. But I said, God, if you're real, you need to help me because I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. That's what I said. That was my prayer. Again, I hope that doesn't offend anybody when I say it.
It actually chokes me up, man, honestly.
So we're probably, and I did this for every night for 6 months. And about 6 months in, I forgot to lock the door one night, and my wife walks in, and this is as things started to progress, and I started seeing some of this change, and she did too. And she walked in, and most wives are nervous they're going to catch their husband doing something else behind closed doors. I'm on my knees praying to God, like, help me. I had my finance book laid out on like our budget, just kind of laid out on the bed, like, help. I don't know what to do with this. And she comes in and she catches me praying. And I thought, I heard the door open. I went, oh man, I forgot to lock the door. And she knelt down by me on the bed. Sorry. And she said, we're going to make it. Yeah.
That's awesome, man.
And that's the night everything kind of changed. I mean, it didn't get, overly better right away, but the fact was we were in it now. And we took the D word out of our conversations. We promised each other no more of that. We would keep doing what we're doing. So she's amazing. She's an amazing woman. Anyway, so we started going to this church and got involved in kids ministry. I learned the Bible in children's church, just so you know. Like, I didn't go to formal seminary or anything like that. Children's church is what taught me the Bible. Because I had to learn it that way. That was part of it. And yeah, and that led to a lot of different things. So working at P&G, so I worked at P&G for 7 years and that's kind of the same time all this was going on. And when I kind of found Christ, or he found me, or however you want to say that, it was probably in my last year at P&G, I met a guy named Bob. Bob was 54 and a half years old. He had been working at P&G since he was 18. And he ran washing machines for a living. That's what he did. He was a chemist by trade. He grew up in Chicago, loved his dad, loved the Cubs, loved trains. Like, I got to know him really well because he would wait for me at the end of this long, narrow parking lot, and we'd walk in together. And, he at 7:30 in the morning, he'd be parked in his car. I'd get out of my car and I'd go over and we walk in. And I learned all this about him. And he used to go, because he was going to retire when he was 55. And he used to grumble and mumble about how much he hated his job, how much he hated the people he worked with. And then he would tell me how many days he had left till retirement, right? And it's like, mumble grumble 106 days, mumble grumble 84 days, Tim. I mean, finally, one day I said to him, I said, Bob, you are, and by the way, he's a multimillionaire because he had worked there so long. He went through all these stock splits. And I'm not talking about like a couple million, like this is tens of millions. Like, this guy had money. You never know it, right? He's driving like a Pinto and whatever. And I said, what are you doing? Just leave. But like, why are you here? And he goes, well, if I stay, I get the watch and I get the party. And I'm like, I'll throw you a party and you can put whatever you want on that Rolex when you buy it, because that's like a dime to you. And he's like, no, I'm going to stay. And so 31 days before his retirement, I pulled in the parking lot and he wasn't there. And so I walked in and I asked one of my colleagues, I said, "Hey, has anybody seen Bob?" It was unusual, but you know, every once in a while he wouldn't be there. So I said, "Anybody seen Bob?" And just nonchalantly, one of my colleagues walks over and a really serious look on their face and goes, "Hey, nobody told you?" And I said, "No, what?" And they said, "Bob died of a massive stroke last night. He passed away." And I went upstairs and quit. And I didn't call my wife. I just went upstairs and quit. And then I called my wife. And her response was so beautiful. She just said very calmly, she goes, "It's okay. God will take care of us." And that was it. That's when our journey truly began. So I thought, what would it look like to start a company that when people's feet hit the floor, they couldn't wait to get to work. Like they couldn't wait to get to work because they got to tell stories about people. They got to tell people's true human stories. Like, what would it look like if we did that? So we started a market research. I started a market research company in 1997 called Focal Point. Had a business partner at the time. He wanted to take the company a different direction. And so in 2000, I kind of gave him everything, said, "Here, take it. It's all yours. I'm going to go start something else." And I was reading Matthew 5-7, the Sermon on the Mount. And the word seek popped out to me in that passage. Seek first the kingdom of heaven. All these things will come to you as well. And I said, that's the name of the company. So we started Seek. And Seek was birthed in 2000 and ran Seek for 24 years and sold it, 24 years later. And worked for a company that bought us for 4 years and then decided it was time to go off and work with leaders who were going through what I've already been through, that I could help kind of guide them and navigate them through that. So quite a journey. I got 4 kids now, and yeah, the rest is kind of history. So
that is quite the journey. Yeah, it's a couple things. I mean, you were talking about Bob. I kind of heard the Bob story before from you. I know I heard. I think you told it to me once before. Maybe I don't. I know I've heard it, but it was as I was listening to it. I'm like, man, a couple lessons here, guys. A, don't run off and quit your job before you talk to your wife, unless you have a really strong foundation in your faith. You know.
Yeah, we were testing the waters. We were just testing the waters to see how strong it was. That's what's going on.
But like something that jumped out at me, and I don't know why this never jumped out at me before, but Bob's legacy is that story you just told me about him being a grumpy old man.
Yeah, but in some way, but you know what? But he wasn't a grumpy old man. He was a guy who didn't like his job and stayed in it. That's what it was.
I mean, okay, I don't want to split hairs on that one, but that's kind of the way that's what I see. You're just not happy. If you're grumpy at work, why are you grumpy at work? Probably grumpy at home. I mean, I don't know, but either way, he's remembered for being that someone that comes in negative energy, and I don't want to take anything away from Bob because I'm sure Bob was a great guy and an awesome fellow, but to me, there's just that, and it's something that's been kind of on my heart lately, personally, has been kind of navigating. I read something in Second Timothy, or not Second Timothy, in Acts. Our church is doing a series on Acts, and the pastors, there was this one verse where it says this was a place where they were called Christians for the first time, and he goes, Christians mean little Christ. And as soon as he said that, all I could think was like, that's what I want people to remember me. Like, that's what I want. And don't hear, I hope people know that I'm saying this from a very humble place of like, I'm not putting myself in the same boat as Jesus, but I want people to say, I want my children to say that like my dad, like he lived a life that was like, I saw Christ in everything he did.
Yep.
It's because it's fun. I read the book. Have you ever read the book Halftime by Bob Buford?
Yeah. Great book.
Yeah. And so ever since once I read that book, I've been trying to figure out, hey, how do I answer that question? What do I want my epitaph? And when he said that word, little Christ, all I could think was, wow, man, like that's really what I want. That encompasses.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was, straight up stealing this from Andy Stanley. So, um, but I was listening to this podcast called The Beyond You Leader, and it's interesting because he reframes that thing, and he says let's, I think it was his wife that gave him this quote, but she said, when you're done with your career, makes it a little less morbid, right? But when you're done with your career, what is it that you want people to stand in line to thank you for? I think that's an interesting question, right? Because that when we talk about our careers and our leadership, what do you want the people you've invested in, you've built into, you've mentored, you've coached, you've grown up with, you've started companies with, whatever. What do you want them to say at the end of your career, right? Um, you mentioned my mission statement, or that my personal vision statement is to add value to every life my life intersects. And so I've had that for probably 20 years. And at the end of my time at Seek, when it ended, just this past May, they had a 3 hour like love fest when I left. It was amazing. There were people online and in person and everything. It was a lot of people there. And my staff just did it up so right. I mean, they were just so good about it and all that. But probably one of the most meaningful things was Justin, who I worked very, very closely with during that time, was one of the people interviewing me. And he said, "Hey, man, I know your personal vision. Like you've shared it with us so many times." He goes, "But I just want to tell you, mission accomplished." And that, it's coming from a human, but to me, I translated that as God saying, "Well done, my good and faithful servant," right? At least for this part of your life, this part of your career. Um, well done. So I don't know. I hope everybody has that. My wife came back. She was listening, online because she had to be in Paulie's while I was there. And she goes, everybody needs this in their lifetime. Everybody needs a time where people talk about their legacy before they die,
Mhm.
not after they're dead, because they need to hear it. They need to be in the room feeling it from people around them. And yeah. So I don't know. There's a lot to that. And what will your legacy be? What do you want people to thank you for at the end of your career, where they would be willing to stay
Put
in
that,
line?
actually wrote that down here, and because I'm like,
It's
that's
not mine. It's
okay.
Andy Stanley's wife. Let's give her credit for that. So
I've been known to quote Andy Stanley more than once, so it's okay. I like
yeah,
him. How I like his wife too. Um, but is so what? How is that, or what happened that really transitioned you from this marketing and this marketing kind of background to into coaching? Because you started coaching before you left Seek.
I did. I
So
did.
where did that when and where did that transition start really unpacking for you
Yeah.
as a coach?
So in 2015, we we had the dark night of the soul in the business. So I had a business partner at the time, and we had two of our biggest clients pull out from doing research just in general with anybody, not just us. They just stopped doing it, and we lost about $500,000 a month in revenue. It just went away, overnight. And so you can imagine what that does to a company and all the things that happen. And through a series of events, profit covers a multitude of sins. And so when the covers got pulled back on the business, I realized that we were not very financially sound. And I blame myself for that. As the CEO, it's also again, it goes back to that lesson I learned in leadership years ago. It's always on you. So there were some mistakes made and taxes not paid, and you know, and unbeknownst to me, I could plead ignorance, which I was, but at the same time, I was ignorant because I wasn't paying attention,
Mhm.
right? And so that's on me. And so that was a painful time. And so my business partner and I separated all of our entities. He got some properties. I got some properties. I got Seek. He got another company we started together. And And that was a rough transition, but we made it. We made it through, and we did it with, I think, honor, through the process. Um, but going through that process, we hired a coach. We hired a coach from Five Capitals, Brandon Schaefer, who and Brandon coached us through that. Um, and anyway, somewhere in that process, he said to me, he goes, when you go through stuff like this, there's a pretty good chance you're supposed to help the next person through it.
Hmm.
And so I think you'd make a great coach. What do you think of this? And I said, I don't know. I'll try it. So I got certified, and I coached a really cool guy as a pastor in Austin, Texas. He was my only client. I think he paid me $250 a month back then. And we made some headway, and then one day he just started making introductions for me, introduced me to a number of companies and whatever. And then I started coaching them, and then they told people, and the next thing you know, it's just, coaching is a word of mouth business, just like the research industry is. And so if you do good work for those clients, they recommend you. And everything I coach on even today is based on mistakes that I've made, right? Or hard times that we've been through, or, things we changed that worked, bringing a company from the brink of bankruptcy and everything all the way out to being a thriving company that was, had a high value mark on it, things like that. So, but I had to learn how to do that. And so that learning curve, to be able to pass that on to other leaders so that they don't make the same mistakes I made, is, and it's just turned into a really, really great career. And so it started getting so much that I was turning people down to coach, because I had a full-time job as a CEO, right, running a division within the company that bought us. And then one day just said that it's time that I do this full time. So started doing that and haven't missed a beat. I mean, took on a bunch of new clients, and I like long-term engagements with my clients. I mean, some of them I've been with for 6-7 years now. And always bringing something new to the table, and helping them through whatever it is, and see them grow, and the trajectory growing up, and profits increasing, and culture being amazing, right? I always love the culture piece, right? Because that's what Seek was. Seek was a place where people love coming to work. And I thought, man, what if we could create that in a lot of other businesses too? So I love the culture piece as well.
Cool. So, man, I mean, obviously, successful businesses. You've been very successful as a coach, but through this story, I know that you had to have figured out how to, I don't like to use the word balance, but learn how to ride the wave that life is, and create and balance on that surfboard, of,
Yeah.
hey, how am I going to successfully build this business out and turn it into what it is, and then sell it, but also maintain being a good dad and husband and being present in my personal life. I mean, what was that like for you and your wife, and how were the lessons there that you learned, and that you could share with the guys that are listening to this podcast?
Well, I'll start the answer. This might be the toughest question you asked me, because I'll start it with uh, just a phrase: crisis always produces opportunity. Right? Every crisis produces an opportunity, and if you don't believe that, and you're deep in your heart, it's really hard to get through the crises, right? And so looking for where God's at work in the midst of these trials is always a hard thing. And so um so right after I sold the business and was working in the business, right, as a president of the division that we sold to the larger company, a year in, my daughter dove into a pool and broke her neck, and was paralyzed from the waist down. And so we got a call. It was after her freshman year of college. She's my youngest daughter, my youngest kid out of four. And we were my wife and I were sitting on the porch that night, kind of raising a glass, toasting the fact that we got our youngest daughter through her first year of college. She was a productive citizen of society, just like the other three. we did it. Now it's time to live our lives. And we kind of cheersed, and did our thing. We went to bed that night, and about 10 minutes after my head hit the pillow, the phone rang. And it was the phone call that you never want to get. It said your daughter dove into a pool and broke her neck, and she's not moving. And this was in the height of COVID. So I couldn't get into the hospital to see her. So I drove over, saw the ambulance come in. I met the ambulance there, couldn't talk to anybody. Watched them, wheel her into the hospital, and just fell on my knees in this parking lot and said, I don't know what's going on, God, but something. I just broke. I mean, just bawling in the middle of this. I had a friend, his name's Jeff Bauer. It's been one of my best friends since high school. And he drove down from his house in Westchester, within the northern part of Cincinnati, and sat with me in my truck. And we cried together, and we prayed together. And his wife went over and sat with my wife. And community is, you see the beauty of people during these times. And I mean, we had no idea what was going on. And anyway, she ended up with a what's called an incomplete injury. She lost mobility from her waist down. This was 4 years ago, almost 4 years ago. And anyway, that whole journey was crazy, but it was interesting because we had to move to Denver. That's where the hospital was that specialized in spinal cord injuries. So my wife and I lived in Denver for probably 4 months. Then we brought her back to Cincinnati. It didn't work very well there because, not everybody's set up for ADA, whatever. I'm making a very long story short, but through all that, my wife and I had this conversation where we said, where she said, she goes, do I wish this never would have happened? Yes. But do I wish I was the same person that I was before it happened? No. Right. Because in the midst of this, it changes you. And couples, and families, they have the choice to either lean into each other or run. And fortunately, both parties have to make the choice to lean into each other. And we did. And because of everything we had been through in our marriage, I think we knew how to do that. Right. And so we stuck together. Long story short, my daughter is out in Denver now. She lives by herself in an apartment. She drives. She can drive a car with her hands and hand controls and all that. It's a rough situation, right? But she flew to Polly's to see us and back. And she flew back by herself. So her independence is coming every day, and there's a lot of really good things that are coming out of this. And she's a different person than she was. She was adopted from China. She came with a lot of baggage, and a lot of rough stuff during her growing up time. But there's something different about her now that wasn't there before the accident. So yeah. So balance, watching our kids respond, in their own different and unique ways, some good, some bad through all this. But bottom line is, we're all there. We all love each other, and we're all moving this thing forward. So, family goes through crisis. It produces, opportunities.
So what would you say was one of the, I don't want to say the biggest struggles? I mean, obviously you shared, just your first 7 years of what that was like being at P&G, and then and that struggle that your marriage was in through that. I mean, obviously that produced a ton of resilience and really built the foundation of your faith. And would you say, I mean, that's just really those pivotal moments that has just continued to strengthen and grow your faith and your relationship with your wife through all of this? And then obviously I need to ask, you said you adopted your youngest daughter, so we skipped that part completely. when,
We only have so much time.
Kids,
How long are people going to listen to this?
Hey man, I don't, this, I mean, I know guys are listening.
Yeah.
And I know that I have to be persistent in this because I believe that the stories of these men, of you, of Corey, who was on last week, the guy Walker, who I had here a couple nights ago. I mean, he's 26. You know, his story matters,
Yeah.
and I think as leaders, and as men, like we're always looking at these grandiose leaders, and there's nothing wrong with those guys, right? There's nothing wrong with looking at a Jocko Willink or looking at Craig Rochelle or these other amazing leaders and leaders of business. But I can't relate with that guy when it comes down to it, because he lives in a world that I'll never live in.
Mm.
Like, I know that if I walk into the coffee shop, I'm probably going to see Tim Urmston. I know Tim Urmston's pumping his own gas and having a conversation with the lady at the Quickie Mart, right?
Mm.
And I think that's the difference between, and it's not by any fault of their own. They're there, and it's great that they have these amazing stories and these tools. But I think there's something that becomes a little more personal when I'm telling the story of the guy who lives literally down the street from me,
Yep.
or a guy I know I can pick the phone up and text him and say, "Hey, man, I need some prayer."
Yep. Yep.
That to me,
Makes sense.
a personal intimateness to the story that just makes it relatable and really gives hope to guys out there to go, "Hey, man, I can make a change. I can look at the crisis that my family's in right now, and I can ask God, hey, what is the opportunity, or where are you at in this, so that I know where to go."
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah, it's a fun journey. It's a fun journey. It's a hard journey. It's the adoption thing, that all started when we had 3 kids at the time. And we were thinking about a fourth, and we were at a Super Bowl party, and my wife is kneeling on the floor playing with our kids or whatever. And Dan Marino came on the Super Bowl commercial, and he and his wife, and they adopted 3 kids from China. And I'm just passing through the room, right? It's halftime. So I'm passing through the room, and I look over and she's got tears just pouring down her face. And I thought, oh crap. This was in Dayton, and we had to drive back to Cincinnati. I said, I know what we're talking about on the way home. And paperwork started the next day, man. I mean, we got started, a 2-year process. I went to China to pick her up, and there were like 12 girls that were being adopted in this group that we went in, but she was the only one that got sick. She got bronchitis, and so we had to stay extra. We had to stay an extra week or whatever. And so back then, China wasn't what China is now, and I just remember going. She had to get antibiotics, and so antibiotics, they were about 10 years behind the U.S. antibiotics, and they gave them to them as IVs in their forehead. And it was like a gymnasium, and they would call you up in Chinese and in Mandarin or Cantonese, one of the two. And we were in Guangzhou at the time, and they would hook an IV up, and then they'd have these poles where you hook the bag on and you sit with them on like a church bench. And there were thousands of people in this auditorium, all getting IVs, all kids getting IVs in their forehead. To me, it was a real weird thing. We had to do this for like a whole week. And the third day they said, hey, we want you to come in, and we're going to do like an acupuncture kind of thing with her. So I took her in. They had a needle. It had to be 6 inches long. And they made me stand outside of a room, and I could look inside the glass, and I watched them jam this 6-inch long needle into her neck. And like, I thought he was going to go right through her neck. And here I am. I'm about a foot taller than everybody else in this place. I got a baseball hat on, and I'm bawling because that's my little girl, right? She's my little girl now. I mean, that's all there is to it. And she has a look on her face like, why are you letting them do this to me? And I'm like, it's one of those moments. And I don't handle that stuff very well anyway. So anyway, we got her home, and she got healthy. She probably got one of the strongest immune systems in the world. Like, this kid never gets sick. Sorry, this young lady now, she never gets sick. So but yeah, so, and that was a little bit of chaos because she came with what's called reactive attachment disorder, which is just it's like oppositional defiant disorder. It's a very angry. So she screamed from the time we got her till the time she was 18, really, and just awful. It was hard on us, hard on our other kids, but we got her through. That's why we were toasting that night. And she got through, she made it through. But anyway, it's that persistence and that stubbornness that's probably getting her through this accident now. And yeah, it's a tragic story, but at the same time, there's a lot of hope laced inside of it, a lot of opportunities inside.
Do you tie that grit that you have inside of you to something in particular?
Probably trace it back to my dad, that work ethic, right? Just going back and say there, quitting is not an option. He was not a fan of quitting. Like, you finish something. If you want to quit, you finish the season, you finish the
Mhm.
race, you finish the whatever you do, you commit to, you finish. And you know, that's probably where that comes from, that strong, work ethic that he had, and he passed on to me, my brother, and my sister. All of us are like this. It's a crazy thing, but you get through it. You walk, you work, you know.
Definitely.
Yeah. And you rely on God. I mean, without faith, how do you, I don't know how people get through crises without faith. I know some do. I don't know how, but they do. But man, why would you? It's so much harder without him. Like,
Really.
just can't imagine that. So, yeah. Yeah.
So,
Is that helpful?
yeah, man, without a doubt, I definitely think that just kind of gives us a little light into just, I love the story of just the of adopting your daughter, and just I understand that. Like, I can empathize and say that that hasn't happened to me, but I can see my wife literally, just kind of her heart breaking for something, and me just going, "Yep, I know what conversations we're gonna have on the way home,
Yep.
because we're gonna make a
Mhm.
change, and I need to get on board because there's not going to be any change in her mind.
Yep.
This is something God did for her, which is cool." Um, the other thing I think I love what you said. When you go through something like this, or what you said that Brandon said to you, it's like this: you are supposed to pay it forward. And I think when you said that, I wasn't even thinking about, hey, you learned and you were coached. I literally, I started reflecting on my my past, and how my personal struggles have been the tools and the things that I learned that made me the man I am today. And this is what I have to pay for. So it wasn't necessarily a positive coaching moments. They were more like hard life lesson moments.
Well, we're
Yeah,
gonna learn somehow, aren't we?
that is how I learned. I need a degree that says "School of Hard Knocks" on on my shelves. I think, because that's
Yeah.
probably where I have most of my lessons from. So were there any other particular lessons that you lived or learned that really plays in how you lead your life, your family, your work, your marriage?
Yeah, this, I think it goes back to my vision statement, right? Is I want to add value, like, to everybody. Like, I don't want to walk away from any situation. Again, I'm not perfect at this, but that's not what I'm saying. But this thing sits in front of my mind at all times. It says, when I walk away, will that person go, man, I'm better because I met Tim, or I'm stronger because I met Tim, or I laughed harder because I met Tim, or whatever it is. And again, I've stood in front of the CEO of, you know, Google and Facebook and some of these other places, and you know, large corporations. And I've also stood in front of the, lady at the Quickie Mart, right? That's taking my money for pumping gas, right? And I hope when I walk away from both of them, they say, gosh, that was a great experience. And I'm different because of it, like in a good way. Um, I'm not sure everybody's that conscious of it, but one day when I'm standing in front of him, I hope he can say, mission accomplished, right? You did it. You did add value to every life your life intersected. And, I want, yeah, I mean, otherwise, why are we doing this? Right? I mean, we live in a world, William, that's so angry right now. Everybody's so angry, and everybody's throwing insults and got opinions and saying awful things about each other behind a computer screen. And you just see it everywhere, and you can feel it. I mean, it's awful. And where are the value adders?
Yeah.
Where are those people who are going to go make a difference, who are going to Jesus said, you've heard it said, but I say, right? You've heard it said, you know, and I love this, because what he's doing is showing both sides of the coin, and he's going, I know that the world is telling you this, but I say do this. And it's so counterintuitive. Like, why would I try to add value to somebody who um, is not giving me what I want or what I need or whatever? Why would I do that? Because he said to. That's because he said to,
Yeah.
right? Do you see people the way Jesus sees them? And that's been the prayer. That's probably the most profound thing. You've never, and again, depending on how you feel about Bill Hybels, I love Bill Hybels, and he said, you've never locked eyes with anybody Jesus didn't die for. And I was with a friend of mine one time, and we watched this. And again, I might make some people mad when I say this, but sorry. We were out shopping one day, and there was a drag queen, a guy dressed as a drag queen going through the parking lot of this thing, and my friend just had this, I don't know, and I'm sure it was based on a lack of understanding or whatever, but just this kind of, what the heck is that? And this thought crossed my mind, that's somebody Jesus died for. What if we all approached it that way? What if we saw people that way? People who are different than us, people that didn't agree with us, people who did things that maybe even hurt us, right? Or hurt people we loved. And what if we said, that's somebody Jesus died for? Because that's what he did.
Yeah.
That's why he said, pray for your enemies.
Yeah.
That's counterintuitive. That doesn't make sense in this world. It makes sense in the kingdom of heaven. And so he's teaching us a heavenly perspective. And I don't know. That's where the vision statement came from. Add value to every life your life intersects. So I don't want to get there and him go, yep, Tim, you were right. That guy was a jerk. Yep, Tim, you were right every time you argue with your wife. Right. Yep, Tim, you were right when they overcharged you at the restaurant and you made a fuss. Good job. Hey, yep, Tim, you were right when you yelled at the Delta, ticket agent because the flight was delayed and you made a big scene at the airport. I don't need that. And I don't think that's what God wants. It's not about us being right. It's about us adding value. It's about us being kind.
Yes. And you're making me think. I have a men's retreat I go to every year, and they have this list of questions that they kind of walk us through in this process, and they send you home with it as well. But it's a series of questions that I now ask almost regularly to myself during my quiet time, as well as share it with my men's groups and my men's small groups. But it's questions like, "Hey, Jesus, what do you think of me as a man?" And when I usually ask that question to a group of guys, the answers I usually get are, well, I need to work on that, or hey, you need, and I'm like, that's not what Jesus is saying to you. And he'll never say that to you. That's not what a father says to a son. And when you're able, and that's what you're talking about right there. There's that you're adding value, and that's what he does, is he add values to everybody's life out there. It doesn't what you look like, what you clothes you wear, what car you drive, where you're from. None of that matters, because he doesn't see, he just sees just what you said. He's never locked eyes with someone that Jesus didn't die for. And that is 100% true.
Yeah.
The other thing it makes me think about is a sermon that our pastor gave last year, and it was on grace and truth. And we are all so quick to say that we're giving grace with 100% truth, but we're really not. we're given maybe a little bit of grace and
Mm.
100% truth, or we're given 100% grace with a little bit of truth. And Jesus was 100% both all the time. And that's why he was able to do it,
Yep.
you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's what a lot of us forget. We get tied up in a lot of the laws and everything else, and but above all else, love one another as I have loved you. That above all else is probably important. We should probably pay attention to that they would love one another, right?
Yeah.
And love one another as I've loved you. Yeah. Um, anyway, if that's what I'm guilty of, because I'm not smart enough to remember all the other stuff. But he does say all the commands can be wrapped up in these, that you love one another, right? And love the Lord your God, love one another, and love the Lord your God with your whole heart, mind, soul, and strength, right? And both of those have the word love in it.
Yeah.
And both of those are geared towards loving people and loving God.
100%.
Right. And if that's what I'm guilty of at the end of my days, I'll stand up in front of him and say that. I made a lot of mistakes, man, but bottom line, hopefully no one can accuse me of not loving.
Sorry if you hear the blower go on in the background.
I don't hear anything. It's all good.
That is good. All right. So last one, what advice would you give to men who want to live a life as a trailblazer in any areas of their life?
Wow, there's so much to that. There's so many answers to that. So when you live as long as I have for these 55 years, there's a lot of, moments. The easy answer would be write a vision statement for yourself. Like, look, you have to have a true north for where you're going, and you have to have something that guides you. William, the most common spiritual practice, spiritual discipline any of us will practice. Do you know what it is? What's the thing that you and I will practice more than anything as far as spiritual disciplines go? You know what it is?
Praying?
Nope. Choosing.
There you go.
Choosing is a spiritual act. And if you don't have a North Star, a vision, then when you choose, you're kind of like what Jesus talked about, being blown by the wind back and forth, right? Being lukewarm, right? These are all things that he says beware of, right? But when you have a vision statement, right, you have something that sits out in front of you, every choice you make is going to either get you closer to that vision or farther away from it. You now have a North Star that you're going towards, right? And so you wake up in the morning and it says, hey, here, I'll give you a perfect example. There are mornings and when I wake up and I'm like, gosh, I really don't want to do this today. And then I think about the vision and it goes, will you be adding value to someone's life in this interaction, or will you walk away and cancel, or will you walk away and make an excuse? Well, I have a choice to make in that, right? And hopefully I choose one that gets me closer to my vision. Right. And that's ultimately until it goes to that grit, some of that drive that we're talking about and things like that is, it's not just something that's written on a wall, it's written on my heart. Right. And that vision has to be written on your heart. It can't be put in a book and put away. It has to be something that's it's got to be written on your mirror in your bathroom and written on your steering wheel and metaphorically written across your wife's forehead. It's all that kind of stuff to add value every day. So what is that? So that would be sort of the easy answer, right? Get a personal vision statement and then make choices that take you closer to it. And that way you'll have some compass as to where things are going. The maybe harder or more difficult answer is this. You don't have to go alone. You've heard the phrase, you want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far, go together.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of truth in that. Community, just the Trinity in and of itself is community, right? Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, they're together. He's demonstrating for us what community looks like. I don't know if I would have gotten to these places and in these situations and these opportunities and all that kind of stuff if I had tried to do it myself. So from all the guys I've talked about, my mentors early on, Keith Brown, who I was telling you about, my brother-in-law, Brandon, my coach, right? Coworkers, father figures, that coach that yelled and spit tobacco in my face, right, that day. And there's people who will walk this road with you, whether you want them to or not. Embrace that, because if you try to go alone, it's going to be really bad for you, right? It leads to isolation and loneliness, and every leader experiences that. And as you go higher up in organizations and you get better as a leader, the temptation to do it by yourself gets greater, and you don't want to do that.
Oh man, that is some valuable insight. I've never thought about choosing like that, and so um, that's cool. I think I just need to kind of leave it there. So one last thing, if people want to find out more about you, Tim, what you're doing, where you're at, how to work with you, how do they do that? What's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so I'm not on Facebook intentionally, just so you know. I can't stand it. I don't do the social media thing. I am on Instagram. I think it's T Urmston, at T Urmston. So you can find me there. Instagram's just better because it's pictures and funny stuff. So I like that. Or they can just reach out directly and email me, T Urmston at 5capitals.net. If they want to send me a note or whatever, they can absolutely do that. Or check out the 5 Capitals website, 5capitals.net, and you'll find myself and a bunch of other coaches there who would love to help you walk on your journey with this stuff and help you do some of the things we've been talking about. Yep.
Well, man, I think this has been great. I mean, we're hour and a half in, roughly. So
Every second, man. Thank you for letting me tell my story. I haven't told that story in a long time, so it's been a while.
Story, and I was really glad. I mean, I was honored to be able to hear it, man, to be on the other side of this mic from you. I think I've always known that there's been a connection, or at least for me, there's always been someone that I always felt like I could turn to and ask for advice, guidance, wisdom, and you've always been that for me, and I appreciate that. But there's also, for whatever reason, I've always felt a connection to you as a leader, and how you have lived and how you do live out your personal vision of just creating value in people. And I just appreciate that. I'll make sure to put in the show notes how everybody can find you and contact you to work with you, because I know that you have a ton going on through 5 Capitals, and it's really, really exciting. So you guys definitely need to look Tim up and get a chance to do it. So is any last words, man?
No, just thank you, man. Thank you for doing this, and keep at it. Keep at it, because you're right. These stories need to be told, and it's as good for the listeners as it is for the speaker as it is for the listeners. So, yeah, just appreciate you giving me the room and the space here, man.
I appreciate.
Love you, brother. It's good stuff.
Well, hey, thank you everybody so much for joining us today and sharing your journey with us, Tim. It's been an honor to have you on the show. And thank you all for turning into this episode of Trailblazers. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to subscribe to our podcast and stay tuned for more inspiring stories of men making a difference in the world. Remember, you too can be a trailblazer in your own way. Until next time, keep blazing your trail. Good to go.
All right. Hopefully that was what you're looking for.
And that's everything and more. I am super. Awesome. I'm contemplating 2 dates. One is the Thursday right after the summit as a drop, and then there's another date 2 weeks after that. I want to kind of go in, but I'm really leaning towards right after the summit, just because we would have been together for a week or 3 or 4 days.
Fun, man. That'd be a lot of fun. Cool.
Well,
let me know what I can do, man.
What's that?
Let me know what I can do.
I will. A lot. I mean, it's just a lot going on, trying to figure out to put all this stuff together now. You know,
Yep. Well, what's interesting is where I think the podcast itself is pretty long. You can remember Henry Hayes when he talked about a drip campaign.
mm-mm.
You were at the summit the year Henry Hayes
Oh
spoke.
yes, I think that last year.
Yeah, you could take these things apart, these recordings, and take them apart into like one area, like little nuggets. Like I'm talking 30 seconds to a minute, like snippets, and put them on your Instagram page or whatever. Of hey, this comes from whatever, that kind of thing.
You're giving me way too much credit when it comes to my technical skills.
Well, that's why you hire a drip manager. It's not us. That's why Henry said, do a drip manager. Don't do it yourself.
Yeah, I'm not the guy to do that. I would do that and then be like, oh crap, I deleted it.
Yeah. I lost the whole thing.
I lost it all. I don't even have 30 seconds.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, that's good, man.
But
that was fun.
honestly, man, the big thing that I'm really wanting to do, and John and I have been talking about it, is I want to really figure out how to start doing, like, I want to set up like an event, like speaking events, like a day and a half kind of thing, $250, pack in 100, 200 people into a room. Like,
this thing Corey's doing is really interesting, right? It's know yourself, know others, something. No, I can't remember that. It's like four components, or 5 components for a day of speaking. He's charging $195 for it. We're just getting ready to promote it, and I think it's going to be standing remotely, to be honest. I mean, it's a really good. I'm speaking at the beginning and the end, and we have such a network in Cincinnati that it's going to be rich. But the whole point is, you could take this and plug and play in any city in America, really.
yeah, and I'm kind of hoping John and I can produce something around the trail markers.
Yeah.
Kind of the same thing, hey, here are these tools. How do you implement it in your business? So you want to do more,
Yep.
high level through the process, and this is the tool,
I don't know if you remember the thing that James Justice and Brent did. They called it Game Day. I think it was called Game Day, but it was a full day event, and they had the exact same thing. It was all built around, and they had probably, I'm gonna say, 100 plus people there. So it was great, and I think they charged like $250 for each person to get in and whatever, and they paid to be there. So it was good.
I mean, and the math works.
It does.
From a business side, the math works really well,
That it does, man. I mean, it's so you got all kinds of ideas, and you know what? Here's the thing: just try stuff. That's what you're doing now with this podcast. You're not afraid to try stuff, so just try it. See what happens. See where it goes.
Definitely. Well, man, hey, you have a great rest of your day. I know it's 6 o'clock there, so go enjoy that back porch.
All right, brother. I got to write my stuff for Next Level Leader tomorrow. We're doing the art of communication, so we'll see what happens with that. I haven't even given it any thought yet. So I'll be on the computer late tonight.
You will be fine. All right, man. I'll holler at you later. Thanks, Tim. Have a great night.
All right, brother.